What does it take to turn a napkin sketch into a certified and manufacturable medical device? And why do so many MedTech startups fail before they ever reach the market? To answer these questions, I brought in Bart Verleije. Bart is the commercial director at Voxdale, a Belgian design and engineering firm. And he has completed over 1,400 projects in his 19 years at Voxdale. In this episode, you're going to learn why design for manufacturability from day one is so crucial, how to de-risk 80% of the risks of your device early, and how to keep focused on the job to be done and prevent feature creep. My name is Lucas Pienegonda, and we have helped over 40 MedTech companies to be more sustainable with plastics, and here's our conversation. Hi, Bart, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Lucas, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Bart, you have been involved in over 1,400 engineering projects. Is that right?
Even more since our last conversation.
Even more. That's great. So you have a lot of experience, obviously, in developing medical device and other products. So what does it take to take a napkin sketch, a founder, either an engineer or a physician, that has an idea for a medical device and has like a great idea and draws it on a napkin, to make it a manufacturable certified medical device? So what are the broad steps involved that we need to take in order to get there? And why is it so important to think of the end in the beginning?
Well, the obvious answers would be, what do you need is time and money. I think that everybody knows that the cliche is true. Hardware is hard, and hardware for medical devices is even harder. But what I think is really important is committing to your product. And what I mean by that is do a very thorough research before you define your product. First, see what is the right product, and do that on many different aspects. It's not only on technical aspects, but it's also on user aspects, regulatory aspects, sustainability, your business, and do a very good product definition, and then commit to that. Because what I've seen too much happen in the past is that what we call feature creep. You start developing something and you get input from a third party, whether it's from a physician or a potential client or a supplier, and you tend to veer off your development path. But then you're going into a direction which was maybe not the original one, and that costs time and money. And committing to that first product definition and do that very thorough, and following that through over the next 5-10 years even, is what is the most important part in development, in medical device development, certainly. And then, of course, you have different steps into the process, going from that idea, from that first sketch, over to indeed when pressing the button and producing your product and selling it. We have a whole methodology for that, but that probably would take a separate podcast to talk that all through. But it is basically taking risks away. And I think even more in medical device development, but in any development, you want to take the biggest risks away as soon as possible. Take those risks away and then focus on the rest.
Yeah, I really loved what you said about this, the scope creep or feature creep, because that is something that I think makes your device more costly and also can bring in, let's say, unnecessary environmental footprint, unnecessary complication. So we had several guests on, and I want to compile their wisdom into one or two sentences here. It's one where we talked about eco design was I want to make the device elegant and simple, and that is the least costly and the best environmental footprint that we can have. So elegance and simplicity is gonna beat too many bells and whistles. And the second thing is that you said, and I really love that too, is first understand what product you should be building, because that was the advice of Lisa that we had on in the podcast. Is the first step that she recommends was go out and talk to physicians and understand the problem that you're solving. And if there's no problem, and if there's no, let's say, way of monetizing this, and if there's no business behind it, then yeah, you would have no device. It's not going to be selling. It's unnecessary to spend the next 5 to 10 years of your life developing something that nobody will ever use. So figure out what the problem is, fall in love with the problem, and then understand how you could be making a business out of this, and then you start developing. Well, what's your take on this?
I totally agree. I think it's one of the first things that I learned in still in school many decades ago. Even one professor said to me, "Do not do ego design." And I was thinking, ego design? What do you mean with ego design? It's not to design your own ego, but it was, oh, I have an idea for a good product. Oh, it's really looking good. Oh, I can really use that. This is a good product. I will build it and sell. And as an industrial designer, as a product developer, as a founder, you're not making that product for yourself. You're making that product for your business. But of course, you're making that product to add value to the end user. And I think that's where the key is. See where is that actual added value to the end user, whether that's the patient itself, whether that's a physician using your device on a patient. Of course, there are many different levels of users and how you look at that. But see where does it add value to those stakeholders within your product setting, and focus on that. And if it doesn't add value, then don't do it, because then either it will be maybe too expensive or technologically wise, maybe too complicated. And I always give the very stupid example, but it's a very clear analogy. You probably have you will have a microwave at home. How many buttons does the microwave have?
Like mine has four plus a
Plus a turning. Yeah, that's already okay. Sometimes you see microwaves that have maybe 10 buttons, 15 programs for a lot of different functionalities. Which button do you use?
Yeah, you use the plus 30-second button. This is the one that you use all the time.
And that's typically what you see as an analogy to other hardware developments, is that people have a core functionality or a core idea, which is usually good and valid, but then they start to look at additional features, to that feature creep, and then, oh, I want this, and I want this, and I maybe add that program, I want to collect data, and I want an application, and I want to connect it to the cloud, and all those things. And they can be valid features, but you need data to confirm that it's actually valid in the market, and that it's actually valid for your user, and that it actually adds value to your user. And if it doesn't, then don't do it, because it will only make your development longer. It will only make it more costly. It will increase your time to market. And also, from a business point of view, if you're in a startup or a company, you want to go to the market as quickly as possible. Hence, getting return from your development, of course. And adding stuff along the way makes it even harder.
Two comments to that. So number one is, you mentioned that you should be adding value with whatever you're doing. Like, slightly rephrase that. It's like, for every stakeholder you have to have at least neutral stance against your product. So if you're thinking about the nurse, the purchasing, the C-suite of a hospital, you think about your contract manufacturer, you think about your own company, like your product management, your management, etc. You need to have at least a zero or a neutral stance, or positive. You need to avoid friction. So if someone really has pain because of your product, that is not good, because they will fight harder to, like, this is negativity bias. You know, it's like people will fight harder to avoid pain than to get some benefit. And this is the thing that is going to happen. If it's very good for the patient, it's very good for your business, but your contract manufacturer is like not able to make it work, they will fight extremely hard to get you off that track. And it's like when you try to make a catheter and you try to slide one tube into another. It's like you need to avoid the friction point, because the friction point is what's going to stop your project. You at least need to remove the friction. If you're not adding value, just make sure it's at least neutral. So that's one comment. And the second comment is what you just said. Is like, I think the example is also what is used in the Lean Startup, I think. Because I'm a very big subscriber for the Lean Startup methodology, because the biggest waste of humanity is like the time and effort put into developing product that nobody ever will use. And, you know, it's like the 15 button microwave is one example. Is like, there's buttons that nobody ever uses, and someone meticulously designed, verified that this is manufacturable, that this looks nice, and the time and effort that went into that would have been spent better on developing other stuff. So coming back a little bit to the separate podcast suggestion that you did, can you break down your methodology a little? Maybe also summarize which steps you would need to take going from a napkin sketch to manufacturable device. You can also a little bit summarize and
Basically, we split that up in three big phases that have sub phases. It is still sort of a waterfall process because it is hardware development. You need to build stuff and validate stuff, and doing that in that waterfall setting with clear go no go points within the process is really important, we believe. And what we start with in that first phase, it's a more strategic phase, is where we look at first the framing. What is the product about? Because people that do not know me, we're a service provider in product development. So people usually come to us with an idea for a product or with a certain technology. And of course, we need to transfer knowledge from them to us and also from us to them. And that's really what we do in the very first meetings, the very first conversations is what is the idea? Where does it add value? What is the current state of technology? What is the state of the art? Who owns the technology? Where lies intellectual property of certain aspects within the idea, which is also an important one. And I tend to use an acronym for that, and that acronym is BURST, so BURST, and the B stands for business. We really need to understand the business. We will not find the market for the product. We expect that from our clients to know their market and to have that business savviness and to educate us on that point. The U stands for user. What is the user needs, but also where does it add value? And it's not only the end user, but it can also be the nurse using it, and can also be the patient, the nurse using it, the doctor prescribing it. That can also be a case. The R stands for regulatory. What are the regulatory aspects? Different medical class, of course, but also for other products. You also have CE regulations, safety. It's also the regulatory aspect is really important. The S you will like because the S stands for sustainability. But we see that aspect on sustainability not only on pure product within the product or within the material, but also the lifetime of a product. It's better to have a very sturdy, reliable product that lasts for decades rather than something you need to throw away. I think something disposable, and that's also another topic, I suppose, disposable versus reusable within the medical devices. But there are all aspects that we need to know, and what is the impact of those decisions? And then the last one is the T for technology. And finding all those five aspects and finding as much data as possible and as much understanding of those use cases is what enables us to what we call making a job to be done, a value charter, ending up into what we call a product charter. That's the first one. Still in that strategic phase, then when you have all that context, when you have already top level requirements, you look on how to solve that technologically. There are many different ways of solving a feature into a product. Whether you built in your power supply in your laptop or it's a separate power supply, it's a choice. And it's just a choice based on experience, based on those regulatory aspects, based on those business aspects. But that's what we do conceptually first. Sometimes we need to build even a proof of principle of a certain part that needs to be validated already early in the process. But based on those conceptual exercises and already the fun part, because we already start drawing, we already start building things, we already start testing things and building things together, which is the fun part, is what we get to a what we call a product fit. And it's a concept fit, is what we say this is the concept that actually works for all those BURST, for all those burst aspects from the first part that we discussed with our client. It can be a certain technology. Basically, we are technological agnostic. We don't care if it's highly technological, whether it has electronics or software or connected to the cloud. It's not a must for us. It's what really fits the product that we will develop, whether it's only one plastic part that does something that very clever, or it's a complicated machinery with hundreds of parts. If it fits the need, then we will go in that direction of development. And that fit part is a phase where we say we have managed already 80% of the risks. We know where the biggest risks were. We were able to take some away. There are some left, but we also have a plan on how to take those risks away. And then in the next phase, we start the detailed development. It's a long phase. The first phases are usually on the shorter side, but they really add value to the product because you make decisions. It's like deciding if you want to build a car, whether you build a car with 3 or with 4 wheels. It's a very big decision. And you don't want, at the end of the road, you don't want to change that decision and say, oh, that fourth wheel would have been really handy. Let's change the design. So that's the very simple analogy there that I use. but it's something that really adds a lot of value and provides a lot of focus on the actual detailed development. And in detailed development, you still diverge, but within the same concept. And I think it's if you say you make decisions on materials to use, you make decisions on geometry, other aspects, but you don't make decisions on let's add this feature for the user or let's see if it fits in another medical device class because of this and this. That's what we try to avoid within that detailed development because otherwise you have many iterations which take time and money. So really that focused development. And at a certain point you need to verify and validate everything, make sure that it's certified, and then it's handed over to manufacturing. Yes, I think that's the third big phase is the manufacturing part.
So let me summarize quickly. You have a strategic phase where you basically do the concept. You understand the burst, the business, user, regulatory, sustainability, and technological aspects of the product. Then you go about making a concept for how to implement all of these burst criterias. And that is like the first phase. And there you add the most value, you get the most bang for your buck, so to say, and the basically make a plan and the direction of where the product is going to go. It's like a concept phase, and then you need to do all the nitty gritty details. You need to draw everything. You need to develop everything. You need to choose the right materials. That will be the development phase, and then you need to also verify. So you would do, if needed, biological testing. You would do functional testing and all of that. That would be the second phase. That would be what I would call development. And then in the end, you would have the manufacturing and the industrialization phase. You need to spin up the machines. You need to IQ, QPQ for your production lines. You need to make sure that you have a CDMO and everything. And those are like the ones that you need to do. You skipped the regulatory and the approval part because that is usually the one that takes a lot of ping pong and takes a lot of time. In terms of changing the product, it's not going to be the one that is like the most crucial, but it's going to be the one that takes a lot of time. It's going to be like you make a submission and half a year later you hear back.
Yeah, indeed, and we see that in many developments that of course it has their peaks and their ups and downs in time wise. It's also the benefit of working with external R&D or external service providers like us that we have time to wait. We are not getting paid in that time, but we proceed when there is result, and then we can take the next step, of course. But the regulatory aspect is really important. It is also linked to the manufacturing aspect. And you said the first phase is a conceptual phase. Yes, but we take design for manufacturing and we take also along the regulatory part, even in that from the very first day. It doesn't make sense to develop a product that has for demonstration purposes that works, but in the end will be way too expensive to manufacture at scale. And I think that scalability you can only have when you take that manufacturing aspect into account from day one. And you make different choices on materials, you make different choices on production technologies, and you make also different choices on contract manufacturers. I think we do not manufacture anything ourselves. We make our prototypes, we assemble, we test them. But at a certain stage, it's handed over to usually a contract manufacturer, or sometimes the contract manufacturer is our client. That also happens, and we take them along quite early in the process. Also, as you said, if they are resistant to making that product, you will also pay for that later. So getting them involved in an early stage, same goes for everything that has to do with the regulatory aspect. Even also involve that at a very early stage, and maybe doesn't have to take a lot of time, but you need to be aware of what your decisions, what the impact of your decisions in the concept phase will be later on that aspect. And being aware of that and being to avoid very big and very costly mistakes is, of course, really important. That's sometimes usually a decision binary between A or B, and B can be very fast, and A can be very, very slow and very painstaking, whether it's on the regulatory aspect or on the manufacturing aspect. And making those decisions is at an early stage, and that's of course where experts are needed. And by experts, I do not only mean us. I think we always recommend our clients to do not do everything yourself. Focus on what your core technology is, focus on what your core knowledge as a client, but involve aspects like you, whether if it's linked to plastics, of course, look early on in the stage at those aspects, and now those experts to actually verify what you think, and look at different experts to avoid all those risks, to basically manage and mitigate those early risks. And then the focused development part is basically, well, it's not a no-brainer and it's not easy, but if you can do it a lot more focused and you don't need to think about the big questions anymore, then it's certainly faster and more cost efficient.
I agree on like getting experts involved early because wrong decisions, and also especially for materials, like they can have such a huge impact down the line. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna take some sort of TPE for my wearable, and it's gonna be fine. I just take the cheapest one, and it's okay. And then half a year later, I find out that I need to be doing irritation tests. I find out that my TPE cannot fulfill these requirements. I have to do all the tooling again, and I delay my project for 1.5 years, and it costs me a few $100,000 in retooling. That's not the ideal outcome. That is very, very common. That is very common. And I've talked to a lot of contract manufacturers in the past, and they have dedicated development teams, and their job is to take everything that comes from their customers' development and fish out any very hard mistakes in terms of manufacturability and adjust the product just so that their OAE doesn't go to bad numbers in the next 10 years. It's like they have dedicated teams for this. And it's like, this is how much of a problem this design for manufacturability is, that contract manufacturers, CDMOs, employ developers that their only job is to ensure a design for manufacturability. So that would be the first input I have.
What I can maybe add also is we talked about manufacturability and regulation part. What is sometimes an aspect that is overlooked in the developing of a product, of bringing a product to the market, is operational cost. And I don't mean operational cost of the founding company, but I think when using your product, there is a whole supply chain, a whole operations around your product, which can have a huge impact on the actual cost at the end of the road. And I think that's also sometimes overlooked. I think if you need to install certain processes to get your product installed, the installation of a product is a very good example there. But also maintenance as something that is maintenance free or has the right to repair by the client. Those have all an impact on the operational cost, and that's sometimes overlooked. Sometimes they say, yeah, but put the product on the market and it will be fine. Yeah, but there's also your warranty, and there's also your service, there's also your maintenance, there's also keeping your spare parts in stock for at least 10 years or more. Those are all aspects that people need to take into account. And as a designer, as a product developer, you have a huge impact on that from the very first start. So that's all those type of decisions are really early stage, but really important.
Yes, and you need to make smart decisions. Like you'll have to view holistically the landscape and the whole life cycle, and then decide which aspect currently deserves to dig deep. Because if you dig deep everywhere, you're having paralysis by analysis. You just take forever to develop something. Like the market has shifted by this much that your product is not going to fit the market anymore. It's like if you take 15 years to develop something, it's not going to be like state of the art anymore. So it's a very, very tricky and balanced decision on which aspects you're going to be prioritizing and what things you just need to have a look at, evaluate, say, okay, the risk is acceptable for this, and we're going to move on. Another question that we have is like, how do you balance the need for documentation versus the, let's say, spending time actually changing and innovating the product? Because what we found is that lots of medtech developers, they spend most of their time actually just documenting what they do. And what would you recommend in order to like speed up this documentation process? Do you have any insights on this?
I would say thank God for AI at this point. If you see what we have been doing in the last years and implementing AI on certain aspects for reporting, for documenting, for taking meeting notes, for all those type of things, really saves a lot of time. I know it's a painstaking process, of course, of doing it right according to the rules. And we have a very healthy take on that. First of all, we will never be the legal manufacturer. We are not ISO 13485 certified. It's also not necessary. We can work within a certain quality agreement with our clients, and we transfer our documentation preferably directly into the quality system of our client, because they will end up being the legal manufacturer. And it doesn't make sense to put it in our quality system to go through the whole documentation process and then later, and now we need to translate it and copy paste it into the documentation system of our client. Doesn't make sense. So that's why we want to work directly into their system. They are, of course, responsible because they are the legal manufacturer. It's quite an efficient way of working. And then on taking notes and documenting everything, I think AI is taking baby steps there, but the baby steps will become giant steps quite soon, I think. And I believe that we will evolve to maybe something in 3, 4, 5 years that you don't have to document everything. Basically, it runs in the background, it is recorded, and it will make maybe 90% of your documentation at a certain point. I see that now with note takers. You record a meeting, and at the end of the meeting, you have the transcripts, you have the summary, you have action points, and you even sometimes have a timeline if you mention dates and certain aspects. So it's already that advanced now. And people here loving it because, as you said, we want to spend time on innovating, we want to spend time on adding value. And typing a document is not adding value. I think knowing what that document needs to contain and de-risk it, of course, that is important, but making the document itself is not.
Are you a MedTech company and you want to make your device more sustainable, but you're not really sure how? With the link in the description, you can now book your free consultation. Click the link, find a time that suits you, and show up with your questions. We're here to help. I think that's a very healthy take. I think AI can do a lot of good. What I would also recommend, and I'm a very big fan of, is that documentation should be done in a. I've heard both sides of the coin. It's like number one is I've heard the argument Excel and Word are great because they're very cheap and very reliable, and every garage startup can have Word and Excel as documentation. I get that. However, a database first approach where you have like your user needs, your requirements, your test cases separately, and then you can edit and change them via change management. And instead of having to change 17 documents for one ID change, you just change the ID and then it saves you like on every of those changes, it saves you like an hour. And I think that is the way forward to have your documentation with reports and data, structured data in a database form separately, so that you have something that you can read and that you can give to your notified body. But on the other hand, you have structured data that you can edit much more easily because it's just referenced in the reports. And I think that approach is also very, very keen towards be used by AI because AI also loves structured data. It's like it can work with unstructured data, but it's also a lot better if you can give it the structure.
100% agree there. And if you see also, it is ideal for AI. As you said, AI loves structure. If you look at ISO certification and if you look at all the process and all the documentation that you need, there is a structure. I think the structure is not the problem, but it's implementing it in your design process, which is usually the painstaking process. But it is really structured already, so I think it's indeed something very valid in the near future of working in that way.
I also love the idea of Professor Ioner about that regulation will in the future become code so that you basically by step the or we write everything down in lawyer English and just like have structured requirements and just give you the requirements that you have with testable cases so that regulation is going to be code and you don't have to translate everything into okay, what does this mean for us? You just get it as a structured requirement data. That will help a lot. Let's spend a little bit time on requirements because this is also very, very interesting. And we have talked about this, but I'm interested on how you deal with what I would call the law of nature. It's called the conservation of misery. You know, it's like one requirement will work directly against another requirement. So I want the highest quality, best performing device that is also not costing me anything. So how do you basically trade off different requirements? How do you get to the requirements first of all from the, let's say, user needs, and then how do you trade them off against each other?
Good question, and indeed there is that conflict, and you need to make a compromise somewhere, and that's always tough making compromises. Indeed, you need a trade-off, but what do you trade it off with? I think so. You need to compare sometimes very different aspects to each other, very different requirements. That one is more on material and one is more on user. Which one is more important, basically? The way we do that is first, how do we get to the requirements? If that was first part of your question. It's within that framing, that very first part of what we do in the development. First, look at what we call the job to be done. Does the product actually do? What does it actually solve? It's in a sentence, it's not in detail, but it's really the core of the product. And we add a value, experience, and time drivers to it. Those are all important aspects. They are not quantified yet. They don't go into a detailed requirement or a specification even, so they are quite top level, but important aspects. And when you put that in layman's terms and discuss that with your client, it's easier to trade off. And then we say, well, you have a value driver can be cost, needs to be cheap. That can be a value driver because it's really important. And to enter a certain market, you have a certain price point, so cost is really important. You also have sustainability. So sustainability can also be a value driver. And then we do an exercise with our clients where we basically rank all those value drivers, and usually it's only 5 of them. Only 5 make it to the board, the 5 most important ones, and we rank them against each other. Do you think cost is more important than sustainability? And sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no, and then the other one becomes more important. And we do that with all the value drivers. And basically, you get a list. You get a list of 5 value drivers, which that is the utmost important one. It can be the user, it can be mitigating risk, but it can also be cost or anything else for that matter. That ranking of the value drivers is an important one. Then we look at experience drivers, and that's usually focused on the user. How do we deliver that value of that product to the user, and what are their important aspects? And the third one are what we call time drivers, and it's making a product durable over time, making that it lasts 5, 10, 15 years into the market. Sustainability is also an aspect of those time drivers, of course, whether it's either recyclability or reusability or the right to repair. Those things are usually within the time driver aspects. And we also rank them against each other. Those form the basis of decision making within the whole process. So you start, of course, if you go deeper, you go to the regulatory aspects, and from the regulatory aspects, you get, of course, detailed requirements that you must comply with with the IEC 6060 for the electrical part, and you get detailed requirements for that, but those will be distilled from during the process. But if you make big design decisions, we look at what was the actual job to be done, what are the value drivers, what are the experience drivers, and how does it fit there, and how do you trade off within that. And if you make a decision on using a certain material, but it's more expensive, but cost was at the biggest of the highest and most importance of your development, because otherwise you will not be able to enter the market, then you need to reconsider. And we always look back at that product charter, which combines the job to be done, which combines the value drivers, to see which very conscious choices did we make at the beginning of the process. And if we need to make a choice within the design process, where does it fit within that product charter? And that can be used as a trade-off.
I really like the framework of only having 5 value drivers and not more, because what I see is that requirement lists tend to be like Christmas present lists. That would be nice, and that would be nice too, and that would be nice too. And you'll have to get rid of everything that is just nice to have. I have a variation of the 5 why to basically break people's beliefs that this is a requirement, and I call it the how do you know this. It's like you can just do 5 how do you know this. It's like one is That's my favorite one. It's like, you cannot use recycled plastic in medical device. It's like, okay, how do you know this? It's like, oh, it's a regulatory requirement. Okay. How do you know this? And it's like, yeah, it is in the MDR. Okay, how do you know this? It's like, yeah, I have not read the MDR. Okay, so you don't know. And then if you go look at the full text, you see it's like, oh, the material has to be safe and effective, has to ensure patient safety, has to be biologically safe, not contain certain substances. And it's like, okay, that is not saying you cannot use recycled plastics. It's just difficult. If it's just difficult, that is another trade-off to make. Okay, it's too difficult to use it, but it's not impossible, you know? And then you can basically break beliefs with that. And these are the discussions that add the most value when you consciously decide to get rid of requirements, because over requirement is one of the biggest driver of cost, sustainability, and development cost. If you just make a super complex device and have 37 buttons on your microwave, to tie back to that, it's going to take you longer, it's going to cost more to manufacture, and it's going to be less sustainable.
No, and maybe to add to that, we use sort of the same principle as we say data is important. You need to have validated data to make a decision. We say to our clients, use data that has skin in the game. And what I mean by that is, to give you maybe a straightforward example, developing a new medical device. I talk to a surgeon, hey, what do you think about this product? Ah, good. Yeah, looks nice. Do you want to use it? Yeah, probably. Is that valuable data? No, because it's based on a short conversation. But many founders take that to them. Oh, yeah, the idea is validated because he wants to use it. But it's something that it has no real value to the surgeon to say that, yeah, okay, it will be used. I think it's nice. People tend to do that to be positive for the start, but that's no real data. And if you want real user feedback or real potential client feedback, try to see if they can actually do something for you. And if you would ask the surgeon, are you willing? You see, this is the idea, this is the tool. Do you like it? Yeah. Are you willing to spend a day with me on brainstorming on how we can improve the product? And if the surgeon says yes, then he invests a day of his own time into your idea. So that means probably he's a lot more interested than just saying, yeah, it's a good idea. It's not only on those aspects, but on many aspects within the development. If you need data to confirm your decision, make sure that the data is not something that you have Googled, but that it comes from a certain source that has skin in the game. Do you want to brainstorm for a day, or do you want to maybe have 4 people testing it for a week for me? And if then they say yes, then that interest has a lot more value than just saying, yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, I understand your take is, or you just have them. There's like a letter of intent. Okay, if this comes out to market, I will support it to be adopted by your hospital or anything like that. So something that is like a commitment, like a micro commitment, but that proves that they actually mean it. Because people tend to be nice just to not hurt your feelings. It's like, yeah, it's a nice product. And it's like, if you, okay, I offer it to you for $50. It's like, will you buy it? And it's like, this is, like, say, the crux of feedback forms. If you just ask people, people will give you different answers that their action is. It's like, you need to influence user actions and not opinions. If you also, and this is it's also the take I've heard also multiple times, if you ask a physician how they do the procedure, they will tell you what is in the book and not how they actually do it. You can film them doing the procedure and they will deviate slightly, sometimes very severely, from what is how this procedure is done in the book workflow. And that basically tells you a lot more than just if you look at the textbook example, because that's like real life data and actual user action or customer actions.
It's the observation part of our job. And if something needs to solve a certain part of a procedure of a surgeon, we observe. We observe how does the surgeon does it now, and try to be unbiased, but also not make sure that he's also unbiased, so that he can work independently rather than steering with questions. Because if you have an objective observation, it really adds value to understanding what the actual need is. And if you do that with different surgeons, because each surgeon will say the way he does it is probably perfect, but there are also, of course, other users. So it's not, do not rely on one opinion, but rely on several opinions, rely on several observations, and bring those aspects together. And it goes from observing, it goes from interviewing, and sometimes also not for medical procedures, but for other things, doing it ourselves. Really feel how complicated it is in assembling it something at this moment, and what does the actual guy or girl assembling it feel, and what are their pains, and that's also a very important aspect in forming decisions and also taking risks away, as you said in the beginning. If somebody blocks and somebody is not that neutral but has that negativity, it can be somebody along the process. If you block them, if their opinion blocks it, your product will also fail.
Yes, and I think this is the beauty of the lean principle, Toyota principle. Ichigembutsu is like get your boots on the ground, or like real thing, real place is the actual translation of this phrase, and it means like go and see for yourself. Like if you go and see for yourself at a surgery, it's like you will get so much more information. Like we had Axel Böse on, and he's like a medical innovator. He's like engineering background, but works in a clinic. What he did is once he attended this surgery, and this was one of the like best podcast moments that we ever had, because it's like it proves that point. It's like there was the physician having a stapler, and he like bent over very weirdly over the patient, and he was like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm bending over because like I can only stand here, and the device doesn't let me turn like this, so I'll have to bend over like this." And he's like, "I'm an engineer. I can make a hinge here, and this solves the problem. Like no issue." And he wouldn't have known that the hinge belongs there unless he has had seen the surgery. So this is what we recommend all the time: is number one is fall in love with the problem and then go see for yourself. Understand the problem in like first person, and then you'll make the best design decisions.
Quite a good example of that, actually. So, already maybe 10 years ago, or maybe a bit longer, a surgeon ended up on our door. And he said, "Yeah, well, I have an idea." And he's a surgeon. He usually performs a lot of back surgeries. So people are in proning position on the table. So basically face down on the operating table, and they need to be positioned. And of course, what also needs to be done is from their hospital bed, they need to be turned into that proning position onto the surgery table. And he was in a traffic jam because there was a truck that has fallen over, and the firemen were basically lifting that truck with inflatable bellows, with basically a big balloon that they inflate with pressured air, and then the truck came back straight on its wheels. And he thought, is that possible of doing that with a patient? So basically doing it from the back position to the proning position on a table. That was his initial idea. That was his initial eureka moment. And then we started that development with him. And also there, we went assisting him in basically putting people in that proning position right before surgery. And unfortunately, many of his patients are a bit overweight. So we were turning patients of 150 kilograms, and you needed 7, 8 people to actually do that safely, because they are already intubated, they are already sedated, they need to be turned, their feet needs to go somewhere, their arm needs to go somewhere, their head needs to go somewhere. So it's a really complicated procedure. And it was literally like that. Oh, we are ready to turn, and going to the hallway. People, come help. And then we were 7 people actually turning the patient. But doing that, saying, oh, but the feet are also important. Oh, the arm is important. What happens with that part of the body? Where does it need to go? Those are really aspects that you can only see, and by actually doing it yourself and being able to assist in that procedure. And that development ended up into becoming a company, and it's quite successful now. And it has many. It's called Ergotrics, and it has many different products on the market for turning positions, for putting patients in the proning position, for lifting them, supporting them while breathing. All whole different product range, all based on inflatables, basically balloons. To give it, to say it a bit disrespectful, it was quite a hard development to get everything done to where it is now. But now they are quite a successful company with many different products and different variants on the market. So it's always nice to see that from that idea on the highway of seeing the firemen lifting a truck to an actual medical device company that has a whole product range on the market.
Yeah, you know, The elegance of this solution is what strikes me, because it's like if you would have come, or if he would have come to you with the problem, oh, we have this patient and they're like 150 kilos overweight and we need to turn them with 7 people, you might have gone like a completely different route with the solution, like robotics, big
There are
machines.
things like that on the market, and we also looked at them. We also do benchmarking of the idea, so what is already on the market, and we saw awful things basically. So complete robotic systems which cost hundreds of thousands of euros, and we do it with an inflatable pillow. So, or he does it. Yeah.
I have this industry myth. I don't know if it's a joke. I don't know if it's real, but it's a story that persists and it has a meaning, and therefore I would like to tell it. It's like it's about toothpaste manufacturing. A new CEO comes in, gets a bunch of complaints about toothpaste not being in the box that it's supposed to be in, and then he tells his quality manager, go fix that problem. Quality manager hires an engineering firm. They do a project, they install a high precision scale, they have a system where it just sounds an alarm, and then a person has to come over and take the faulty box out of the manufacturing line and then push a button to like run the manufacturing line again. Few 10,000 spent, 6 months, on time, on budget, very good, everybody's happy. Then like 3 months later, CEO comes back and says, "Okay, let's see how much default parts do we have? Like how much scrap rate do we actually have with this empty box problem?" And then he goes to his quality manager, and then what happens is like you have some, they have some, and then it's just zero. And they think, okay, the quality data not get recorded properly, and then they investigate. And in the end, the CEO ends up in the manufacturing line and goes and sees for himself with the guy who's actually operating that machine. And he asks him, "Hey, about this box and about this alarm system, like what's happening here? How many times does this happen?" And he was like, "Yeah, it was pretty annoying to like every time go over and shut the machine up. So because I have other stuff to do, so I just put a fan in front of the manufacturing line and it blows out the empty boxes and it's good." It's like fan costs you $20 in 10 minutes to implement. It's like the elegance of this. I don't know if it's a joke or if it's real, but it's like it just shows you how very simple solutions can be like far superior to what you have. And because you tend to over engineer, because we're engineers, we just tend to like use the best high tech solution, and sometimes just the fan does the trick.
I totally agree, and that over featuring, that over engineering is what kills a lot of startups. Also, it takes time, making it takes time and money, and that can kill a startup. And as we said in the beginning, time and money is important, but making the right decision is probably a lot more important than and committing to that. So indeed, no, and it is a quote of Leonardo da Vinci: "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication," and I really believe in that. But it's also what we take to heart within the company. That's also good where we are technologically and product and material agnostic. Yeah? If it does what it needs to do, it's a far better product than making something complex.
So, Bart, we would come to that question of the podcast. What advice would you like to give to our listeners in terms of designing and engineering a product for the medical market?
First, get money. No, that's not so true. So really analyze your idea, but make sure that it's not based on assumptions. So really talk to relevant people, talk to stakeholders, and make sure that the data that they provide you with has skin in the game. I think if you look at the user and stakeholder side, that's really important. Make sure it's not just them being nice, but that you actually contribute something that has value for them, so it will have value for you. So that's a really important one. Do that from the beginning. The other one is talk to experts. As a founder, stay with what your core expertise is, stay with your company, stay with the commercial side of the company, and bringing a product to the market is what's the responsibility of a founder. But for the other aspects, whether it's regulatory, whether it's sustainability, whether it's plastics, whether it's development, talk to experts and take their advice to heart and really implement that. Use that information to quickly get to the market. I think if Do not try to do everything yourself. Do not try to do your accountancy yourself, because you're not an accountant. You may be an engineer or a surgeon or whatever. So it really depends on what your profile as a founder is, but really stick to what you know and stick what your core knowledge is. And for the rest, gather a good team around you, gather experts around you, and rely on their opinions and decisions, and to take the next step as soon as possible. I've literally had that. I will not mention the name, but there was a startup coming to us, and they were saying, "Yeah, we've been developing this for years, and we've been trying this for a whole year." But they were not engineers or not product developers. They came from a different background, and they were working on a product for over a year. Yeah, but we cannot solve this, and we've been looking at it for more than a year now, but we didn't find a solution. So they started searching for experts, and they ended up into our office. And it's not about bragging about myself, but they were in the first meeting with me, and I solved it in that meeting because it was something that we already did. It's something that was in the background of our company that we already knew, and it was solved within the hour. For us, it was something very straightforward. For them, it was a very big mountain to climb. But they spent a year of their own time and money on it, and that's why they see experts usually think, "Oh, an expert is expensive. I want to have advice, but it sounds expensive." But it's not. You will save money at the end of the road, whether it's on our services or your type of services or on the regulatory part. If you really talk to the right people at a very early stage, it will really accelerate, and it will avoid costs in the later phase.
Before we wrap up, I have like three inputs in here. So number one is what you mentioned is like get people with skin in the game. I would like to add that try to refute your hypothesis. You have the idea that this is a good idea. Don't look for proof, look for counter proof. Look for why this is a stupid idea. Because that will, like, if you don't find that, it's much more likely that it's actually a good idea. It's what Nietzsche called philosophizing with a hammer. If you don't find an argument against it, it will stand. So if you try to hammer it and it doesn't break, that's good. It's durable. That's one thing. The second thing is you said it jokingly, but I don't think it's the baddest idea. The core function of a startup is to get funding and then to employ that funding in the best and useful way. That means it's like if you have money, you can take an expert on board and they will solve your problem. It's like lots of problems are already solved and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. But if you don't have any funding, it's extremely difficult to get these experts on board. So try to first get funding is not the baddest idea. Prove that you understand the market, prove that there is something, because that you need to do that in order to get funding. But then don't bother too much with the solution of your problem, because technical feasibility is something that engineers are for. And then the third one is an advice that I got from a former CEO of mine is time is the only resource that you cannot compensate for. It's like, okay, you spend some money. It's not easy to get money, but there is possibility of getting funding. You can't reverse time. You can't go back to 5 years ago where you should have started and take another route. And therefore, it's like time is of the essence. Try to be fast. And you are fast with, first of all, understanding your market, getting funding, and then employ the right expertise. If you're a startup, of course, also for bigger companies, is of the essence. This is also a very good advice to take to heart.
And I agree. And indeed, time is something that you cannot get back. That's true. And if your idea is solid, and certainly if you look at medical device world, where usually the added value for society is quite clear of what your product or should be, then getting money is doable. I think it's maybe back to one of the first things that we said is committing to your product, committing to your solution, and really avoid feature creep. Feature creep, and that's deadly for a medical device because you need to get it all through the regulation aspects also, which is really important. And what I learned from you is the how do you know this? I'm going to use that because I really like it. It's sort of similar to what we say. Is it skin in the game of your data? Is it really true? And how do you get that data? But I really am also going to use that in my conversations with our client, because it is typically the things that we want to know. What is the real value of the input of not only our client but also of other people.
It's like things that will make you fail is not the things you don't know. It's the things that you think are certain that are not true.
Indeed, indeed. Know the unknowns is also an important one, indeed.
Okay, Bart. So, any last words from your side?
Well, I think the committing part was also was one of the most important one. I think, and basically similar to what you said, everything can be solved technologically wise if you have time and money. But it's knowing what you need to solve is basically the most important one. What is your product actually solving? Where does it add value in the whole product chain, in the whole for every stakeholder? Determining that as a first thing. Maybe the most important decisions that you will take are at a very early stage of your development, and then how to solve that technological wise and how to solve that with go to market time and budget. You will figure it out. If you don't have that focus on what is your actual product, unfortunately many startups fail there, and they keep on adding money from investors, adding money for grants, but not really going somewhere. And I think committing to a product, committing to a solution, committing to a certain go to market strategy, that's the most important part for a startup.
Thank you very much, Bart. This was Bart Verleije from Voxdale. Till the next time. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, share it with someone who can derive value from it. And let us know in the comments if you enjoyed it. If you still have questions, use the link in the description to book your free consultation. Click the link, find the time that suits you, and show up with your questions. We're here to help. Thank you very much for watching, and until the next time.